Hello and welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. I dare say that the Sheila Divine are one of those great examples of a band who deserve much more attention than they've received over their career. Forming in Boston back in 1997, most casual fans of the group would have come on board around the release of 1999's New Parade record, which spawned the likes of Hum, Like a Criminal, and more. If you're a fan of music from the late 90s, and frankly if you're listening to this podcast, I dare say you are, New Parade should be required listening. Go ahead, take 46 minutes and give it a run. I'll wait right here. See, that was great, wasn't it? But this story doesn't end there. Following another record a couple of years later, the group would split, with a pair of reunions eventually resulting in a constant stream of records since 2012 as an independent act. An acclaimed group of musicians, songwriters and performers, the band's fanbase is strongest in the US Northeast as well as Belgium, and with good reason too, because they are a stellar band who are still operating at full capacity decades down the line. This week, they return with their latest album, the fantastic The Middle Ages. If you're a fan of alternative rock with soaring choruses, frenetic energy, and a viscerally earnest approach to the craft, you'd do well to check this one out. Since the Sheila Divine's inception, Perrino has been up the front, serving as a vocalist and guitarist. This week, he was kind enough to join us for a chat, well, we actually spoke back in March, to chat about the band's history, their newest record, and his familiar link to another friend of the show. Anyway, have a listen to the Sheila Divine's The Middle Ages, have a listen to our chat, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. Perrino, thank you very much for joining this episode of the Trusty Chords podcast.
Thanks, Tara. I'm really excited to be here.
So for those who might not recognize your name, could you give me a few words to introduce yourself and tell me why we might be chatting today?
Well, let's see. I sing in a band called the Sheila Divine. We're from Boston, Massachusetts. We've been around for quite some time, since we're a 90s, late 90s, very late 90s, early 2000s band. Back in the day, I toured with the likes of the Morrisseys and Manic Street Preachers and those kind of bands. So.
Right. And I also liked how just when you were saying, oh, we're a band from, I saw you mouthing the word 30, like you're about to say we're 30 years old or something. Then you just went, oh, from the 90s. Because 30 almost sounds like a bit of a dirty word in that sense.
Yeah. Now, I used to have a problem with like my age, like, and feeling weird about it. But now I'm fully embracing it and kind of enjoying that I'm still doing it.
And I think we briefly spoke last week before this podcast, and I think you also told me you have a familiar link to one of this podcast's previous guests. Is that correct?
Yeah, my cousin is the singer of Portugal the Man, done poorly. So.
Right. Well, I'm glad to get the whole family.
I actually lived with him when I was like 18, and he was like 10. And yeah, so anyways, it's just.
So back in those days, what were you realizing? Hey, this guy's got a bit of musical talent. Like he's something.
Well, he tells me that I'm the reason he like started playing music. But
right.
Anyways, but yeah, no, I didn't. Honestly, it's like funny because when I was touring, he was just starting out, and he would like text me like what pedals to buy and all this stuff, and it was like, and then he's like, I'm coming to town. And then whatever. And then a year later, it's like he was huge. And
that's crazy.
Far surpassed me. So.
Amazing. Well, I mean, look, he has you to thank. But I guess before we sort of like talk about all the reasons why he has you to thank, what I'd love to do at the start of these podcasts is go back in time to where a love of music first formed. So I guess, Aaron, do you have any recollections of your earliest memory of when music first resonated with you?
Yeah, my mother had a pretty good vinyl collection. So I don't know. I think when I was 5, I would always play Led Zeppelin Zoso and slick my hair back and put on sunglasses and then lip sync to Black Dog. So that was like where it started. And then there's some of the vinyl I remember was just like Neil Young, Fleetwood Mac, Stevie Nicks. And Bob Seger. So yeah, anyways, so that's where it first started. And then when I got, I don't know, maybe 6th grade or 7th grade, they used to have this online like mail order thing where they would give you 12 albums for like 1 penny. And you could put like fake like a fake name, and then you just get the 12 albums, and yeah, and then mail fraud.
Well, I'm sure there are still thousands of upon thousands of dollars owed to what Columbia House was it? I think
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
exactly
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
yeah. Well, look at them now, I guess. So,
yeah,
but I guess like you come from this sort of background of like I'm guessing what effectively is what they call classic rock now, like your Bob Segers, your Led
yeah,
Zeppelins, and everything. So,
for sure.
how did you sort of go from that to playing music yourself? Like what was the link where you
Uh,
sort of say I want to do what they're doing?
yeah, well, I was always into music. And then, when I got into like more high school era, I met this kid named Brent who became my best friend. And I always say he was like Ferris Bueller or something, but he had like the cool computer, the synths, he was into like sequencing. And so, you know, we I would just like go over to his house, and then I'm like, we should make a record, whatever. So then we tried to make like these new order jams, and our first band was called BPM, Beats per Minute, and so that's where we just started. And I didn't know how to play an instrument, so I was just like singing, and he was playing, and then I wanted to learn. So then my mom bought me a bass, and then I got a guitar, and I just taught myself chords, and it sort of like slowly evolved.
Right. So obviously it's a little bit interesting journey where you go from classic rock to like your new order types of electronic stuff to
Uh,
I guess what we see
yeah,
today.
well, in between that was hip hop and like Public Enemy and all that stuff. So I like DJ'd some like high school dances and whatnot. But yeah, then I think probably like 11th grade, I went from like hip hop and all that into like like going to parties, and they were playing REM and the Violent Femmes and all that stuff, and that's then in the Smiths, and then the Smiths was like, and the Cure kind of like turned it for me. So
Right. Actually, it's very funny that you do mention the Smiths and everything because I was just reading the news earlier today that Morrissey cancelled a show because he was sleepy.
I saw that. I saw that.
I thought
It's it's
some great breaking news
it's
right there.
be it's beyond ridiculous at this
Yeah. But I mean, I'm going to guess you haven't cancelled any shows because you're sleepy. But you did mention that like an early band like BPM before. That's one question I do love to ask folks is because like usually folks who play in bands they have those early outfits sort of peppering the resume. So you had BPM. Were there any other of those formative outfits before the Sheila Divine comes about?
Yeah, then so that was my high school band. Then I went to college, and I started this band called the Waverleys. And that was when I was in 20 on the state. And I actually moved to Boston with that band. And but then we broke up like within 6 months, and that's when the Sheila Divine formed. So just those two were the two bands.
Well, that's actually like a very good segue because my next question was, when the Sheila Divine sort of comes together, what like was there a specific vision or goal that you had in mind for this project? Like, were you thinking about upending the world of rock music or just having fun in the process?
Well, actually, I quit college and moved to Boston because I wanted to be a musician. I chose Boston over New York because New York seemed too big, and Boston had the Pixies and Lemonheads and all these bands, Buffalo Tom. So I kind of we moved to Boston, and yeah, my goal was to like try to get a record deal and tour and do the thing. And then Sheila Divine started, um, and we got signed like pretty quick, like within 6 months of being a band.
Wow. So I guess I mean not many bands can say they get signed within 6 months. Like, what was the what's the word I'm looking for? What was the killer ingredient that you guys had at the time?
I mean, we just went out every single night and sort of, I'm really like into manifestation and just sort of, you know, you become the thing you want to be. And so we would just like show up at the Middle East, which was the kind of the club, and we're the Sheila Divine, we're here, and like, you know, hanging out in that scene. And then there was like a party for this label called Cherry Disc, um, that we went to, and my friend Amy, who's actually like a pretty successful manager now, she manages like Margot Price and like Danger Mouse and stuff like that. But at the time, she like when the party was like closing, she put our demo tape in the boombox of the record label and just like left it in their office. And then when they were cleaning up the party, they listened to it and then they called us, and that's how it happened.
I'm actually just thinking about how many good artists were actually on the Cherry Disc label. Because I mean, yeah, I
Yeah.
think he had bands like Semisonic on there and things like that.
Yeah.
Some good ones on
Yeah.
there.
And we were lucky because when we got on it, they just as we got on it, then they got bought out by Roadrunner, and we like that's how we got to like so we made it kind of by default.
It's also actually funny that you mentioned like the venue the Middle East in Boston because obviously obviously I'm quite aware of a lot of like some of the famous Boston bands like you mentioned the Lemonheads, you mentioned the Pixies and everything, but there was actually an Australian band who existed for a while called the Middle East, and the
Oh, really?
very sort of elusive band, very beautiful band that a lot of people miss. But I remember trying to find a lot of their stuff, and the only things that kept coming up for me was the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones live at the Middle East. I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for. That is
Right.
not what I'm here
Wow.
for. But I mean, at least I got to hear the live album from Mighty Mighty
Yeah.
Bosstones.
Nice.
Um, but I guess for like a lot of, well, I guess for the average listener, if they're aware of the Sheila Divine, it'd probably be thanks in part to the early days and songs like Hum.
Yeah.
Now, I do submit that the new Parade record deserves to be held up as one of the finest records of the '90s. It's a stunning
Thank you.
record, but I guess there was a bit of momentum and success at the start of things. So I mean,
Yep.
for a group that gets signed within like 6 months, I can only imagine, launching a band, having that sort of signing success, having college radio success, that must feel pretty good. But like, how were you sort of feeling at the time? Were you sort of thinking this can't last, or are you sort of thinking like, oh, hey, this is a pretty fun ride?
No, it was a fun ride, and and it's like it was a whirlwind, and obviously I made lots of dumb decisions, and you just sort of whatever. It's like this crazy ride where you're like, all right, and then the record came out, and then we toured, and you know, it's I was like in it, and then I think then we got dropped after that record, and it's like the same story is like most bands, but it's like the sixth time around US where like it's you see it like kind of going the opposite direction, and you're sort of like uh where is this going, and then it kind of petered out, and then I got like a real job, but I've never stopped making music. I've like consistently done it. It's just like the level of like whatever my intent on trying to make it. But as of late, I feel like my kids are older, and I've got like kind of whatever we can get to it at the different, but it's just like reinvigorated, and so now it's like kind of like picking up again, where like I signed a record deal, and like we have a ton of shows booked, and we're sort of going for it again.
Yeah, that's definitely something I will be touching on very soon. But
Yeah,
that's also another good little segue because one thing I was thinking of just before is you're definitely someone who enjoys enjoys making music. I guess is the best way I can put it. But
yeah,
I guess
totally.
for you, what does making music mean to you? Because some people consider it therapy, others a creative outlet, and but everyone will say it's a vital part of them. So for you, what does the music
Yeah,
mean?
I would say it's therapy, definitely therapy. It's also just who I am. Like I've been making demos since I was like 16 years old. Like as soon as I learned two chords, I got a four track, and I wasn't learning covers. I was like instantly just writing songs, and it's just something I like. It's just I can't really say why I do it, but it's just sort of like the thing I do.
Yeah, right. And I guess you also sort of mentioned before how like after the first album the band got dropped and everything, then you have like yeah, I guess you have the second album, which I guess let's be blunt, doesn't perform quite as well as the first, probably due to that lack of sort of label support and everything. And I guess it is the last album that we see from the Sheila Divine for a while, so there's a bit of hiatus and some solo work
Yeah.
from yourself. So I guess I don't get where I was going with that question, but I guess my next question is, what were those years like for you to sort of like, not have this band which you'd been in for a while and then sort of like trying new things?
Yeah, I like started a solo project, or it started as a solo project called Dear Leader. It was supposed to be kind of like Bright Eyes, whatever. Just like, and then it kind of turned into a band with people I was friends with. So then we did that for a while, and like, I would go to Europe still, and like it kind of was like real, but at the same time, I started working in advertising. So um, I was doing that as well, and then I had the like my son, and so it was kind of like trying to do music at the highest level, but not because I mean, I just think like the hard part with music or whatever at a certain point is like when you're 20 and you're living on $500 a month or whatever, like you don't care. You're just like, whatever. I'm in a van, like with my friends, and we're just partying. But I think when you get to like 30, you're just like, I don't want to share a room with these people. I want, like, and so I just think when you make music, like if it's like your sole form of income, it's very difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess those, or the solo project like Dear Leader sort of comes around following, I mean, it comes about following sort of the 2003 split from the band. So obviously,
Yeah.
I guess the band splits around 2003, there is a brief return, and then since 2010, it's consistent. So I guess why do we have these inactive periods in the timeline? Like, why is there the ebb and flow of the band's existence for a while?
I mean, I think again, it's just like once I started, like kids were involved and other things. Like I just think you just kind of like, but the thing is, like I still like put out records like every year, but it's just kind of like some of them are quieter than others. But yeah, and I think now it's more, you know, I'm motivated by collaboration. Like that's like always been. So I need a foil to like push me. Otherwise, it's like I'll just like make songs and put them on Bandcamp and no one will hear them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, that's how some of the best artists can be like just be discovered
Yeah.
and flourish and everything. Because thankfully we do have these sort of platforms like Bandcamp these days, which
Yeah,
I guess back in the 90s when Sheila Divine was starting out, you guys would have killed for things like Bandcamp, right?
totally. I mean, it's just crazy to think how, like, 'cause there you actually have to go to a recording studio and then uh play shows. So you would like get in a van and tour. That's how you got, bands.
Totally.
Now
Um,
you can just post something and have a million people like you
yeah, just reap the
without ever
benefits of it all.
ever playing a show.
Now, I think it was a couple of years ago that you sort of mentioned, I think online that you were going to be using the Shield Divine sort of as the sole moniker that you use going forward. Like you like, I guess you're
Yep.
saying you're not going to do any sort of solo work anymore. Anything you do is now going to be under this moniker. Is that correct? Or
Yeah. Yeah, because like it's pretty much like the Sheila Divine is me, and Dear Leader was me, and No Hope No Harm was me. Nah, well that was Luke, and then Aaron and the Lord. Like I write all the songs and all these things, and I just feel like I might as well just use the Sheila Divine as the moniker, and
just
then
consolidate, right?
yeah, and like so, like the sets now have Dear Leader songs in it, and like so, it's very fun now that I can play songs across my entire career. But the fans still get to hear some choice new parade and some deep cuts and all that too. So
Now, obviously, I do want to look at the recent happenings, upcoming music, and everything, but I do need to
yeah,
ask because looking at, I guess, some of the metrics of the Shield Divine, I do notice that there is a huge fan base for Belgium. Why is
yeah,
Belgium such a huge fan base for you guys? Because I think you look at the like Spotify's markets and everything. The top three are cities in Belgium. Very impressive
yeah.
for a band from the US.
Yeah, honestly, it comes down to we had when the record came out on Roadrunner in Belgium, this guy Steph DeVos, who is like our A&R guy, he loved the record. He got it on all the like national radio and stuff. And Belgian people are psychos, and they like love going to concerts, and so it's just been amazing. It's like a second home to me. I've probably been there like 40 times at this point, but it's yeah, I don't know. They never. It's just continually. I go like at least like once a year, like if not a few times a year, and it's been amazing.
Hmm.
But it was that guy and getting on the radio. We actually had hits there, so like
That's
in
wild to
Maribor,
think, isn't
like
it?
yeah.
Yeah, because it's also very fascinating just to sort of see where bands really sort of hit. Because like it's funny you sort of mentioned the Violent Femmes before, because I know that the bassist of Violent Femmes lives in Tasmania in Australia, Brian
Oh
Ritchie,
wow.
and
Yeah.
they would tour here almost all of the time. Like for a long time, we had a very long running festival, very famous festival called the Big Day Out. And the
Yeah, I
very
know it.
first one became famous because Nirvana played just before they sort of blew up. But it was initially a headline festival for the Violent Femmes. A lot of people
Wow.
forget that, and it's so sort of weird how these bands have these sort of connections to countries where you think it wouldn't translate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of friends in Belgium actually, although they've never mentioned the Sheila Divine to me. As you're right, they're psychos. They're they're interesting folks.
Well, it's just like the really a festival culture there. Like, I
Absolutely,
mean,
yeah.
like every weekend there's like a festival.
Mm,
It's just really, and it's a little bit, it's interesting. I mean, I have like a lot of theories on it, like because I'm from Buffalo, and it's sort of like this underdog city, and I feel like Belgium's kind of like this underdog country where it's like, you know, but they have like they're interesting because they have like kind of the passion and food stuff of France, a little bit of German, like
mm.
whatever, and no, it's an interesting.
No, I definitely understand that underdog mentality, especially where I'm from in Australia, very overlooked compared to everywhere else. Like people think of
Yeah,
Sydney and everything, but it's like, yeah, there's other places. Um, Now, also just before we, oh sorry, as we're talking currently, we're talking in mid-March, but this episode will be going out around the time of your new
yeah,
album. Bit of a spoiler alert there, but it's just before you guys head to South by Southwest as well. So we sort of mentioned
yeah. Leave
before.
tomorrow.
Yeah, you mentioned it sort of before about sort of going into things with like I guess a sense of momentum and sort of like just ready to sort of really go into this new year. I mean, new year. It'll be halfway through the year by the time the episode comes out. But I guess how are you feeling about that, the trip down to Austin?
I'm excited. I mean, it's sort of our label. It's called Trash Casual, but it's someone I've been friendly with for a long time. This guy AJ, and he runs like A&R at Rough Trade Publishing in New York, and so I don't know. Like I always see him at shows. He's originally from New Hampshire, so like he's just like, when are we going to do a Sheila Divine record? And I was like, sure. And then it's just kind of like that with the people I'm playing with now, like it's just like everyone is like super into it. And so it's just like instead of just me pushing the boulder up the hill, like it's like my bass player is like really into like production, and he used to be the, Dropkick Murphy and the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones like tour manager. Like and so he's really good at that. And my drummer like books all the stuff. My guitarist makes all the content. And so it's just kind of like, I don't know, really, I have a lot of help.
It's
So
amazing.
it's
Yeah,
like,
it's that real sort of like it takes a village mentality, isn't it?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So
So we obviously do have a new record coming out in May, or again, if this episode comes out on the day of the release,
yeah,
congrats on the new album's release. But The Middle Ages, it's called. So it's the first new album
yeah.
since 2024 and follows on from last year's single "Kim Deal or No Deal," which I actually mentioned on this podcast last year, and
Oh, fun.
is the very motto that we have in my band in relation to the Pixies. So it's time for me to ask the typical journalist question. Tell me about this new album. What can fans expect from it?
This record, it's surreal. Well, this was like the worst year of my life, like on so many levels. So I think this album was kind of a catharsis of getting that out. My mother passed away, and I had like a long-term relationship end, and I had to start over. So like a lot of turmoil. Um, but and it's a really like feel like it's the most rocking record that I've made in a while. Like it's like I'm screaming a lot, and I think the fans like that. And the Middle Ages is both a reference to our age and the state of America.
Yeah.
So
No, that's completely fair because like I've obviously listened to the lead single, "I Climbed Inside a Whale," and to me, it's
yeah,
very indicative of what I love about bands like the Sheila Divine. Like it feels familiar enough to bring in fans of the early material, and it's progressive enough not to be considered nostalgic or stuck in the past, as a
yeah.
lot of bands who've been around for a while can get stuck in. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's damn good, and I've only heard the one song so far. So
I'll send you the record.
oh, I would gladly listen to it. But yeah,
Yeah,
so I can only assume that, like, coming out of sort of, as you said, a period of turmoil, which I'm sorry to hear about, but I can imagine it's that sort of thing where, a lot of people will sort of say, hey, you've had these bad experiences, turn them into something that works for you. And like I can only sort of guess as well. You are sort of we're going into this creative process sort of thinking catharsis is what I need, and catharsis is what you deliver. Like it must feel very
yeah.
therapeutic again.
It's good, and also I feel like I'm at a point in my life also where I've just like rediscovered my love for like wanting to be a musician. I always thought like, when you're a certain age, it's like you're like embarrassed, not embarrassed, but like you're just like to like still believe that like you want to do it for real. Um, but I don't know, seeing like the Cures on this last tour and like Nick Cave and all these people. There's just like a lot of cool old people making music that I think is still like beyond like vital, like really good. And so I'm just like, I- I'm going for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I play in a band where I'm the youngest in the band by 10 years. And as a result, like I'm always hanging around sort of like a lot of older musicians. And
Yeah,
I think that's something that I find very sort of I really don't want to make it sound like sort of young person looking at like the older crowd and being like, you guys can still rock. But it's that sort of inspiring thing where it's like that hunger to create. It doesn't go away. And
yeah,
that's something that I find that so inspiring with musicians because so many people will tell you, oh, you'll get over your dreams of rock stardom or your dreams of
yeah.
creativity and you'll settle down, wear a suit and tie. But I really do appreciate folks who just let their creativity always control their life, basically.
Yeah, and I have an 18-year-old son who's at art school, and like he's like I've been, sending him my demos, and he's like, "Dad, these songs are like sick," and he's like really into it, and like kind of his like enthusiasm has kind of pushed me too, and he like gives me like critiques and like tells me, so it's kind of cool to get like the young person sort of, and he's just like, what do you think about this like look for our like photo shoot? He's like, that's so
It's amazing. Well,
kind of
hey,
fun.
it's as I say, it's teenager approved. That's the best thing, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
So I guess one thing I love to ask folks when it comes to new records and everything is what does an album like this say about who the Sheila Divine are in 2026?
I mean, I've always fought like that. I don't want to be a nostalgia act, and it's like I always just want to, you know, I love bands like Spoon or whatever where they come out and they just like they play the new songs. Like, I mean, I love bands like Echo and the Bunnymen too, but they're still doing songs to learn and sing 40 years on, and it's like I just don't want to do that. I want to just be like, here's my new stuff. If you hate it,
Hmm.
we'll still play hum, but like, get ready.
Yeah,
So,
of course. Yeah, it's yeah, I definitely always appreciate those acts who will continue to actually ensure that they are playing the new material because I really dislike it when a band will put out a new album and you're like, man, this album's awesome, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna only play the first album in full, and I'm like, guys, you've got an album of hits here. Let's keep it going.
yeah,
But
totally.
yeah. Well, I feel like I should get down to the portion of this podcast in which its namesake is derived. So, trusty chords, it sees
Yep.
me follow the 1, 3, and 5 structure of a standard chord. Let's ask about one artist that's been impactful, 3 albums that have been influential, and 5 songs you can always turn to. One day I get to stop actually doing this little introduction spiel, but today is not that day. So, I guess my first question for you here, Aaron, who is the one artist that's inspired you the most, whether it be personally or creatively?
Well, I'll first I'll mention a band that no one will know, just because whatever. Even, but I have one that people will know. Like, there's a band like when I was just starting like writing songs in BPM and stuff from Buffalo, and they were called Tugboat Annie, and they were like I just like that's what made me want to play music because I like and I became like they became my good friends. So like, but it's just like very inspired by them. But I would say the one band that's like kind of a through line of my whole from young till now is like The Cure. Is kind of just that's probably my favorite band as far as just I love I love the world they create. The just Disintegrations like one of my absolute favorite records. But I love them.
It's also actually just when you actually mentioned Tugboat Annie, then I actually had like a little sort of like my brain was itching. Like I'm sort of like I'm certain I've actually heard of them in some capacity before. So I had to look them up on Wikipedia. I can't work out why.
Yeah, no, I
And
mean
on
they're on like you can look it up on Spotify and stuff. I
yeah,
just mean like it's definitely like a
of
deep
course,
cut.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, I know, I understand completely, but it's that sort of thing where I'm just sort of like, why the hell is this name familiar? And it's not because of the movie called Tugboat Annie either. So I'm
Yeah,
really thinking, but no, I definitely agree with you on the Cure there as well. Like it's like I've been listening to a lot of the Cure actually recently, and it's just really fascinating to see how Robert Smith has just evolved over the years. Like, and he's definitely not becoming a nostalgia act. Like this most recent album is stunning.
yeah,
Like just to think that
and
like it's gone
and
so
also
long.
just like you listen to like some of those songs like and they still sound like timeless to me
Mm.
like ahead of their time. So like I don't know. Like I mean obviously there's some 80s like production values or whatever that like but for the most part like a lot of it still stands up and sounds just like bands copy. so many bands copy The Cure. So
Absolutely. And for good reason, because they do amazing work.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and my next question would
So
be,
3 albums.
yes, you're on the
Yeah,
ball. I like that.
yeah, yeah. So I would say the Nancy Sinatra and Lee Hazelwood self-titled album
Mm.
is something that I just always listen to that record. It's just got such a vibe. Uh, Cocteau Twins, Heaven or Las Vegas. That's like I call that my winter album. I don't know. And I can't even like I don't even know any of the words, but I still like know all the songs. Just make up my own words. And I'd say like Elliott Smith, XO. It's probably a big one for me. And then maybe throw Radiohead in Rainbows in there.
Oh yeah, that's actually very very nice choice as well. And I do love just how you mentioned with Cocteau Twins, just sort of like not being able to understand the words. But I think that's the beauty of Elizabeth Fraser's vocals, that you don't need
Yeah,
to understand it. It's just it's the feeling of it. I think that that's why I've always loved bands like Iceland's Sigur Rós, where it's just like
same.
it's the
I,
emotion, it's the feeling.
yeah,
Um,
the album with the like naked people running or whatever on the cover. I love that album. But yeah, I make up my own words too.
Of course, yeah. Well, because I think their third album, it's the untitled one, but it's the parentheses on the cover. Like
Yeah,
that's I think the first one that they're singing in their own language. And for the
yeah.
longest time, I didn't realize it was their own language, and I'm sort of like, oh, what is this? I'm trying to like do the like translating Icelandic, then I'm
The Whole
realizing
Atlantic.
Hopelantic. Yeah, that's exactly it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And I'm looking
Uh,
it up. I'm like, what is this? Like, it doesn't translate. Then I realize, oh, they've made it up. It's not supposed to be. But yeah.
that's
Um,
it's easy to write songs if you could just make up your own words.
Yeah, well,
Just
that was something
just
I found
syllables.
something I found fascinating is that like if you actually listen to all the songs, like it's almost using the exact same lines in each song. It's just sort of like delivered in a different way. And I'm like, I wonder how you could do that in English if you sort of like if you have the same sort of phrases and you're like, if I just sing it slightly, will people realize it's the same song each time?
That's fun.
But I guess that's some sort of philosophical musical question we can think of later.
Let's
Um,
try it.
but my final question, those are the 5 songs you could always turn to.
Yeah. So Keeper of the Flame by Nina Simone. It's
Mm,
probably one of my favorite songs. Um, Web in Front by Archers Aloaf.
yes,
Love that. That's like a
absolutely.
jam. It's just like, I don't know, anytime that comes on, I'm like, just uh It's a Man's World, James Brown.
Mhm.
For a while I was like so obsessed with because there's like so many different versions. There's one where it's like 25 minutes long and he's
Yeah.
just like being like, this one goes out to JFK. So good. Um, Farewell Transmission, Magnolia Electric Company.
Yes.
Um, and then we'll throw in The Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen. And then I gotta throw an Aussie in there for you. So I'll do Reptile by The Church.
Oh, very nice. Very nice choice, actually. I just had a very quick blank for a second, but Reptile's the one that starts with that really cool delay riff, isn't it? That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very
So good.
cool. I also it's actually very funny. The very last podcast I recorded was with the band Tiger's Jaw out of Pennsylvania, and their frontman Ben Walsh. That episode actually goes live in half an hour. He also
Oh,
picked Archers of Loaf Web in Front, and
oh
it is
really?
such
Oh
an
wow.
amazing song. It's so
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I've said it. Might have said it on this podcast before. I played a show in Finland last year, like a solo show. It was all covers, and I covered that song. No one recognized it, which is good because I butchered that song completely. I'd forgotten the lyrics because like there's a slight weird cadence change in there and everything, but it doesn't matter when at least you're enjoying a song that good. It's
Yeah,
a classic
it's just a
song.
jam.
Absolutely. Well, I feel this is a nice place for me to say, Aaron Perrino, thank you very much for your time today and for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast as well.
Yeah, thanks. It was really fun to chat.
Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you listened to this episode and enjoyed it, I would really appreciate it if you were able to take a few moments to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on your preferred platform of choice. Of course, and as always, there is no obligation to do so, but considering it helps this podcast in terms of reach and all that sort of dull stuff, I'm forever grateful if you do. As always, I'm over on Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, that's all one word, and I've also got the blog on my website, which is tylerjenke.com. It's tylerjenke/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. That's where you can find a list of all the songs chosen by my guests each week, along with a playlist of all the songs chosen thus far. You can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform where you can throw me a few dollars to keep this podcast running if you feel so inclined. I also need to thank Aaron for spending his time with me this week for the podcast. He was kind enough to join just before the band went down to play South by Southwest, so I appreciate him taking the time to have a lengthy chat. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.